I long ago in grad school, I was like
Yeah.
doing research on upper limb prostheses, and I had
Okay.
idealistic notions about making the world a better place. But
Yeah.
I realized really quickly that focusing on the tech actually was rarely the path to make any real impact.
Yeah.
So I just realized that, well, I have fun problems to work on. Great, I can do that. Um, I have since come to see that one of the most powerful things, for good or ill or fun, that anyone can do is tell stories.
Yeah.
Like stories is the like I don't know the word, but like the native wavelength of human communication. It's not logical arguments and it's not brilliant ideas, it's stories. And so those can take so many forms. They can be songs, but it's not all songs. They can be animations, although it's not all animations. They can be books, but it's not all books. And that is a way to change the world, to have your finger on your own lever. And so I actually, at the moment, I have a passion project, which is keeping me sane, which is I'm writing. I have this like long-term kind of professional hobby, which is to like, make a robot that's as smart as my pup.
Yes.
And so forget about AGI. Like dogs are way smarter than robots right now. That's a very high bar. So I've been playing with approaches and algorithms and tools and trying things out for like 20 years. And it's fun. It's extremely satisfying. I'm my own, CEO and PM and everything else, which I love. And then I also love explaining it. Now my youngest is a senior in high school. He's taking computer classes and he has his eye on possibly a computer science program this fall in college. And I'm thinking and he's taking like a little artificial intelligence class. And I'm thinking well, all of this stuff, this coding, artificial intelligence, robotics, all of this stuff, we don't have to make it as complicated as it is. Like there is a way to explain it so that my senior in high school son can like totally absorb it and understand what's going on and be excited about it. Like we don't have to do this gatekeeping, notation and big words and all this stuff. And so this resonates with me really deeply. So I am loving the form of the project right now is a book, but I'm doing it in little like mini chapters. And each one's kind of got a single focus. I'm finishing up chapter 3 right now, which is just on getting one Python process to talk to another, to share some things, like a very granular, specific part. But in my mind, there's this ordered progression through the whole grand story. And by drilling through and not skipping any steps, it like makes something in me really happy, trying to make it accessible. So this is what I do to I find it really grounding. It's like my professional development. No illusions at all that financially it's going to pay for itself. That's not the goal. I really just love it.
Okay, so in full disclosure, I got to creep all of your websites and profiles, and I started reading your book.
Awesome.
Yes. And I did not have time to finish the first 2 chapters. They are online. I definitely scrolled through and I saw the dog picture and I was like, I'm sold. This is a book for me. So could you I would love to know a little more. So your dog's name is what is your dog's official name?
Her full name is Reign of Terror.
Okay.
She's had this name since she was 8 weeks old. And she was my wife's dog before I met my wife. She was a veterinary technician and an anesthesia tech in a vet practice. And this pup came in with rare cancer. It's usually for an entirely different breed of dog and never in puppies, but she's this like tiny little thing, like a little Shih Tzu, a little ball of fluff. And her owners are like, yeah, I don't think we want to pay for the operation. And my wife was like, well, okay, I'm going to do the operation and then I'm keeping the pup. So it was a literal rescue. And the operation went great, and the pup was fine, but she gave off mischief vibes from day one. And so she has been reign of terror. She loves to snug and she's very sweet, but she
Okay.
has a radar for mischief like no one else.
So how do you translate, right? So in your book, you talk a little bit about trying, and you mentioned making a robot as smart as your dog. And so we think about that all the time, right? We make movies about it, and we write books, and we tell stories, and we have these creative ideas about robots that replicate living things, right? Humans, because I think in a lot of ways we love this idea of like robot humans and that kind of like narcissistic self idealization. But I mean, even dogs and cats and animals, like what are some of the challenges? Like, it shouldn't be that hard to make a robot that acts like a dog, right?
Um, yeah, I love where you're taking this. So the robot as smart as my pup is the one liner elevator pitch, like put a human on the moon, to like that
Yeah.
I use to kind of give shape to this notion. The next level down is forget about robots that look like
Okay.
anything. Forget about like trying to like replicate life or make a companion or even make anything useful. Um, when you look at the type of problems that
Mhm.
we solve, that any organism solves, that's in an unstructured environment,
Mm.
where we are never going to experience the same thing twice. It's always going to be a little bit different. And then looking at how humans, especially, but not exclusively, but humans take that to the next level. And we're in situations that sometimes are not like anything we've ever seen before, like social situations or even like driving, like we're like there's something on the road that we've never even thought could possibly be on the road before, and we have to adapt and we have to behave in a way that's just like likely to keep us alive and likely to help us achieve whatever goals we're trying to achieve at the moment. um, that problem is fascinating to me, and it's on the one hand, like I've been following artificial intelligence and
Yeah.
machine learning research for a few decades now, and going from chess, where everything, the set of things that you can experience, still
Mm.
unfathomably large, but it's minuscule compared to anything in the real world. um, Communication, like say text, where yes, the number of words and characters and their combinations are unbelievably large, but still infinitesimal compared to all of the different physical configurations that we can experience in the world. And a lot of our successes so far have been focused on these very limited domains, almost so much that we forget, we like artificial intelligence or robotics researchers forget how vast the
Mm.
world is, how hard these problems are. So that I love continually poking and seeing like, hey, the latest, greatest, such and such, like, what does it take to break it? If you
Yeah.
can change one pixel and all of a sudden your algorithm classifies an image wrong, then maybe it's not as great as you thought it was. Um, that's that's one side of it. It's like all this stuff, it's very limited and very fragile, but we know that this is solvable because
Mhm.
we're all doing it every day, and our dogs and our cats are, and the birds and the dolphins like are doing amazing things with ostensibly hardware that we've taken apart a number of
Mhm.
times and we've taken lots of pictures of, and we don't know yet. If you talk to any functional neuroscientist, they'll be like, yeah, we know like maybe what's going on, but look at any computational neuroscience model,
Mm.
and it's stargazing. They're like, I've got a pet theory and we've got a handful of observations, and if I cherry pick them, I can stitch them together to cover my theory. Um, so this, I don't mean this to be disparaging of the amazing work, but I am energized by the vast gap between what we see happening and what we understand.
Yeah.
So this whole work is an exploration of that space.
Yeah. So the thing that it's got me thinking about, right, especially when you mention Reign of Terror, and you say something about how if you give her a treat, right, you teach her, I think it's like to sit when you give her a treat or something like that, right? And like you do it enough times that eventually you can skip the treat and she'll just sit. And it's now like the treat is kind of this inconsistent reward, but you expect the behavior to be the same. And I read that and I was like, logically, I was like, okay, logically that makes sense. And I think your next sentence is like, no, that's not what my dog does at all. My dog has no interest if there is no treat, right? And what it got me thinking about was this idea of personality. Your dog, you have a personality, your dog has a personality. I have two cats with two very different personalities. And I'm currently really immersed in the world of animation, which is all about how to convey different personalities, right? Different emotions through, right? If you've got two people walking, no two people walk the same, right? So how do you show what a person is thinking and feeling just by the way that they walk? And so how does personality, does conveying personality, does that come into robotics? Or no? Is it just like, no, robotics is like, it's going to look kind of like the thing, but they're all going to act the same? Like, where does this come into play at all?
I think it does.
Okay.
And there's a couple of really concrete ways. This is just scratching the surface, but in um, like pretty mainstream reinforcement learning, there's a couple of notions where this gets expressed. One is a reinforcement learning algorithm is always living by trial and error, kind of figuring out how things work. Once you've been able to achieve your goal a few times, you have a choice. I can stick with what's always worked, or I can try something else. It might work better. I might get double reward, or I might get bit. Like, I don't know. There's a gamble, or I can play it safe. So that's the exploitation exploration trade-off. The amount of how you trade this off and when you choose to do one or the other, totally art right now.
Mhm.
It's like a bunch of researchers said, well, we've tried different things. We've adjusted the number this way and that. We've added this trick and that trick. And some work better for some problems than others. That's kind of like a personality knob. I think about people that I know, and some are like, hey, I've got a restaurant that I like. Why would I go to another one? Like, this is a solved problem. And there's others that are like, there are so many foods that I will never taste. Like, life is short. I need to taste something different every day. So that's one example.
Okay.
There's another one where in reinforcement learning, their goal is to maximize your reward. An important part of that is how far in the future you look for that. And if you look in the future, how much does it count? If it's for a week from now, or if it's a year from now, does it count just as much as if you got it today, or do you start to decay it by a lot? The how far you look and how much you weigh it, also totally art. People try things, they see what works. Some work on some problems, some work on others. And you may be familiar with the marshmallow problem in psychology, which absolutely failed to replicate, but captured the notion that, like, oh, some people, some small humans are inherently looking further into the future. In the case, I believe in the follow-up, the conclusion was, hey, based on these small humans' past experiences, some of them had reason to believe that there was going to be a reward in the future, and some of them had reason to get what they had at the moment because they didn't know what was going to happen. But that's another aspect of personality that might be influenced by experience, is how much confidence do I put in things staying the way they are? So those are just two very small aspects. There are other fun things where when you're designing a robot and you have, say, dozens of sensors, You have to choose what a robot gets rewarded for, like what they seek out and what they avoid. So silly things like I imagine if I were designing a cat, um, like if the robot gets into a configuration that it's never been in before,
Okay.
maybe that's a little bit of a rush. And that would explain a lot of cat behaviors I've seen. Just like, I'm gonna try this thing that's totally random. Um, but yes, I see a bridge there
Yeah.
between personality, when you start looking at reinforcement learning,
Mhm.
personality and robot behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. My exposure to reinforcement learning is largely watching the videos of reinforcement learning gone wrong, right? And one of the things, like when you see, like we put our human perception on what we expect this robot to do, whether it's real or simulated, like, oh, we want it to go from A to B, and we assume that it will walk like we expect a quadruped to walk, but it ends up like inchworming across the floor or something because it got into some kind of local minimum. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that reinforcement learning is so fascinating to me because you have the robot, you have the things that you're programming in, but then there's also the human expectation of what it should and shouldn't do as well.
Yeah, that's this comes back to the storytelling for me.
Mm.
The Let's see, I haven't articulated this yet. I'm trying to find words for it. So we oh, we're really good at anthropomorphizing things.
Yes.
Like all of our electronic devices in our house have names. When we don't own a vehicle at the moment, but when we did, like they have names. And anything with any amount of complexity has a personality ascribed to
Mm.
it too. So even when it's clear that there's just like two or three metal parts, working
Yeah.
together, we feel that this thing has intent. We feel that it has like certain desires and that it might be working to thwart us or to help us or something like that. So like we project uh, personality
Yeah.
everywhere, and so it doesn't take very much to elicit that. Like if you're creating even a really doofy, AI program or really simple robot behaviors, um, and I'm thinking about this from the point of view now of animation and how the art, which it goes way beyond drawing and getting pixels to move, but the
Mhm.
art of understanding how a certain small movement or a certain timing will translate to the perception of a
Yeah.
personality
Yeah.
in a viewer is that's fascinating. It sounds like
Yeah.
that's one of your frontiers that you get to play on.
It is. Yeah. So it's been really interesting, right? Like I'm currently bouncing balls. Like that is what I do is bounce balls, which has surprised me at how hard getting a ball to bounce in Maya is, right? And not getting it to bounce is fine. Getting it to bounce convincingly is very hard because you're using movement, and now you have to give something. I literally just have to give something weight. I have to give it some kind of relative weight just by the way it moves. But thinking ahead, right? So the sequence that my courses go in is there's this like intro class, and then you go into body mechanics and advanced body mechanics. And so just how the body moves and like how you get the body to move and articulate on screen. It's all what it's kind of told to us as is it's all very like how accurate can you be? How accurately can you replicate a human body on screen? And this is what I find super interesting is that's about where game animators need like anybody animating video games like they can continue on, but like really games are body mechanics. But if you continue on, my next two classes are acting and advanced acting. And so that's when it's like, okay, we've got everything to move accurately. Now we need to understand the emotions. And what surprised me about animation I mean, so many things surprised me, but animators for feature films often shoot their own reference. So you get your scenes, and now, congratulations, you are that character, and you have to act out those lines and convey that emotion and record it. And like, that's what you draw from. And so even now, with my bouncing ball animation, I'm my current mentor has been at Pixar for 20 years. She's been animating for 27 years. She's incredible. I love her. And she's like, you have to feel the weight of the ball. You have to do this so that when you look at it, you hear it bounce. And if you don't have any kind of like physical sensation of this ball, then it's not right. Right? Is how you feel. And I was like, coming from a more traditional science background, I'm like, I'm super into this, but I'm also like, oh, that's weird. Like I have to trust how I feel. And I will be very honest, I did sit down for my first ball bounce and I did calculations and I was like, oh, with gravity and a ball of this weight and it loses this much at every bounce. And I like planned it out and I did it. And it was the ugliest thing I've ever, I was like, I can't turn this in. Like, this isn't right. Like, this is wrong. And so I've got to like let go and like, how does it feel? Which is really, we do a lot of posing exercises. And she's like, if our poses, I think our next one is despondent is coming up. And she's like, you have to feel despondent. You have to like think about like, how does that feel? And like call up an emotion when a specific incidents when you felt that, and then pose it out. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Like this is what people do for a living. Why does anybody do anything else?
I think that is awesome because I've so chapter 4 and chapter 5 of the book that I'm writing are chapter 4 is how to do animation, and then chapter 5 is how to do like physics-based simulation. So not artistic animation, nothing that would be like clever or pretty enough to be included in anything visual, but just like in Python, how do you use matplotlib to make things move on the screen? So this is super, super relevant. But as you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, bouncing ball. Like I've done just enough to know like, yep, the like Newton's mechanics does not produce a behavior that you would expect to see in an actual ball, unless maybe, it's a like marble bouncing on concrete, a couple of very stiff surfaces. And the whole, like, if you delve very deep, pretty soon you got to throw out everything that you think you know about what's going on, and you have to fall back more and more to like your gut feel. And when you look at it, it's like, does that feel right? Oh, not quite. What should I change? I don't know. Let me change this. And then after a while, something clicks and you're like, oh, that's it. I don't know how I got there, but that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, one of the pieces of advice that we've been given, so we work in Maya, which is 3D software. And they were basically like, you want to animate and Maya is here like to mess up your life, right? Like you will fight that. Like the program has been set up so that you set a keyframe and you set a keyframe, and Maya's like, I think this is the best way to connect these motions. And now you have to go in and be like, well, computer, this is actually not how we connect these motions, right? So there's this interesting interplay of how to create movement through a computer, but then also, with reinforcement learning, creating robots and giving them personality. It feels very, I hadn't really thought of this until today, kind of like mirror images of each other in a way.
Yeah, it feels like they're both different parts of the landscape, but it's the same landscape.
Yeah.
An interesting piece that might be useful one day. So growing up in the graduate lab that I was in, they researched human movement, among other things. And so they would have people sit, grab a handle, move it from point A to point B and back. And there'd just be this, the dumbest video game ever, where here's you, here's a point, move to it, and now move back. But the goal was to understand, like, as if the human were a robot, what's going on in the motors and what's going on in the controller to get everything moving around. Because humans do things that are super hard for robots. So, why not try to figure out how humans do it? But one of the things that was fun that came out of that is when a human is moving any joint between any two positions, and they're starting and stopping from at rest, if you look at the speed of that,
Yeah.
it's very predictable. And it's not anything like robots tend to move, where it's like,
It's,
well, we
yeah,
ramp up,
mer-
move at a steady speed, ramp down. There's like part of my part of the research that I leaned on was, well, what equations do we use to actually describe that? And there's some that are simpler, that are less accurate, and more complex that are more accurate. But you don't have to get very complex at all to just get a nice little smooth trajectory. And one thing that is kind of fun is that when I've played around with like linkages and be like, hey, look, moving from point A to point B, it gives a hint of human-ish movement when you do that. Still the sense that it's like, yeah, but it's too clean. Like it needs to be a little glitchy or a little tweaky or something like that. But that's kind of like in this middle ground between like ultra efficient and totally by feel.
Yeah, it is. And like the glitches are where you get those pieces of personality, right? Because we're not moving in the same way, the same thing. My fun fact that I learned yesterday that is continuing to blow my mind is that when we walk, I always thought we swung our arms kind of parallel. We swing them in a figure eight.
Oh,
So
never thought of that.
next time you're walking, just try not to think about it, because you will then move your arm in a figure eight, which me out this morning was like figure eight. And I was like, no, I've got to catch myself by surprise. It's kind of a lazy eight, right? But it's this weird parabola where you swing your arm, that your hand at the end is moving in a figure eight. And I was like, huh, that's really complex.
That's cool.
That's,
yeah.
I was like, wait, now I have to animate that? Like, hold up. Like,
I'm definitely going to think about that now. And for animators, like I think about when you have something complex like human body, I just think, wow, how do you, like, there are so many moving pieces. It seems like one solution is to be like, well, we know kind of the physics of how everything moves together, so why don't we just kind of attach a few strings to it and kind of let the whole thing shake as it will? Or do we like try to specify every last little bit? I have no idea. I'll be looking forward to hearing kind of what the accepted practice is.
They have definitely put me in, we have the bumper rails on at the moment. So if you get a character, right, a human character, which if you want to animate creatures, that's an entirely different track, right? That is completely different. Humans, right? They give us, it's called a rig, and they have nodes for movements. But then what they do is they restrict the number of nodes. So as a beginner, I go in and I can move, like shoulders. I can't move. I can make like it breathe. I can make the eyes open and close. That's the only, they've removed the mouth, the eyebrows. They're like, you can blink. That is it. Maybe move some pieces of hair. And so they restrict it. I have heard that once you get out into the real world, you have full control over it. And I think even the challenge is, we know how humans move. How do monsters move? How do you make a monster believable?
Yeah.
Right? It's got to be, it's a thing that doesn't exist. And now you have to sell this to humans so that they fully buy in that this thing exists in the world.
I'm thinking of Baymax, Big Hero 6.
Yeah.
Like, how would you go about something that can like change volume a little bit? Like, like, great, everything you thought you knew about physics, throw that out. Now you got to start over.
Yeah.
But the other thing that comes to mind is the uncanny valley, which is, like when you, the canonical example that comes to mind is Polar Express with the ultra realistic, Tom Hanks facial capture, where it's like, that's weird. Like, why is Tom Hanks in heavy makeup, or why is that computer moving just like Tom Hanks? Like, it was so uncomfortable. But I imagine that being able to back off a little bit from ultra realism gives a little bit more wiggle room to not, you don't have to try to recreate it exactly, but this is just, I don't know if that's the case or not.
Yeah, so 3D animation is currently in a really interesting place where it started as largely very photorealistic, right? So Toy Story, there's kind of that plastic feeling, it's very realistic. And now I someone's going to jump in the comments and tell me I'm wrong. I think of Intro to the Spider-Verse as kind of a pivotal point. That's 3D animation, but it's stylized. And so the way that it's rendered out breaks physics, right? It's more like we want to render it for these effects. And you're starting to see studios move in that direction. So if you watch the trailer for Puss in Boots 2, you start to see it's still you can tell it's 3D animation, but it's much more stylized, but it's not as photorealistic. And I'm really, really excited about that direction because why not? Right? Like computers can do it. Let's do it. So
Yeah, why waste all of this effort to recreate something exactly as it can be, as opposed to like, this is art. I can
yeah,
make
yeah.
whatever I damn well please.
We're gonna
Yeah.
do it the way I want. So this was something that really surprised me. Like I knew you had created the end-to-end machine learning school, right? I've got a membership. I was floored at, you've put together a full curriculum for machine learning, but you are also a prolific blogger. Like, I was shocked at how much you've written and put out in the world. Because I think many of us have a blog and we're like, yes, I have a blog and I write once a year. You're welcome. So what drives you to create content?
Um, that is a good question. Because it is a drive. It's not a like, oh, I need to do this to check the
Yeah.
box. It's something that I do when I feel stressed.
Mm.
Um, I find a lot of peace in taking things. Great example, Transformers algorithm.
Okay.
Everybody on Twitter is talking about Transformers a year ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I've been ignoring this as long as I can, but I hate not knowing what people are talking about. And if it is going to be a thing, like I got to get to the bottom of
Mhm.
it. And so at the time, I was doing some job interviews too, and there was one of the interviews for which knowledge of Transformers may have been useful. So I was extra motivated, but I'm like, I'm just going to dig and dig and dig, and it's like the analogy from the TV show The Big Bang Theory of like an itchy brain of
Yeah.
like I can't stop until I get to the bottom. Um, Part of the process is I don't understand it until I can explain it
Mm.
simply.
Mhm.
And even when I think I understand it and I go to write it, I realize in the process of writing, like, oh, damn, I didn't understand that piece very well. Let me go back, let me make sure, and then explaining it and just breaking it down to the nuts
Mhm.
and bolts, like the ones and zeros. And when I can finally see how all of the pieces fit together, then it's like, okay, I can relax. Like I may not know all of the, tricky implementation details. I may not know how to implement it on GPUs, but I trust now that I could
Mhm.
track it and build it up from scratch. So that was how my very first algorithmic explainer was on convolutional neural
Yeah.
networks. That was driven by this process. It was in a video format, and then I did one not too long thereafter about recurrent neural networks and LSTMs. Same
Mhm.
story. People are talking about them. I don't know how they work. I hate not knowing. And then I realized that like I really like doing this, and
Mhm.
people appreciated this,
Yeah.
and I disliked like how inaccessible some of this information seemed. I don't believe there's any conspiracy to do so, but it's easy to forget what it's like not to know. And that seems to be far and away kind of the default of,
Mhm.
well, I've learned this now. I've learned all this mathematical shorthand
Yep.
for it. I've learned all these great words. It's far more efficient to communicate it about it in this way. So I will, but a newcomer has no idea how to get purchase on that.
Yeah.
So I really have found a lot of uh, satisfaction in just It's still a far cry from teaching, but at least providing very motivated individuals a foothold, a way to get in, like the thing that I wish that I had had when I started out.
Yeah.
There's another part to this rant. Do you mind if I
Not at
run
all.
with it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So also I thought it would be great, like long-term way down the road, wouldn't it be great if I could teach full time and I could make this content full time and kind of like, build an online school. And so I did generate a lot of video material to kind of like build up curriculum in this direction. And along the way, I learned a few things. One is that as much as I enjoyed it, making the materials is the tip of the iceberg. The real magic is the teachers, people who are willing to spend one-on-one time with students. And there are people who can get it without that, but really to make an impact, to reach the students who have to cross the greatest distance, there is no substitute for that. The other thing I realized is I'm not well suited to that. Because I am an introvert, interaction, very satisfying. It takes a lot of energy. So I have to be careful how I dose it. So it is not a good main bread and butter activity for me. And I realized that what I love the most about this is the writing. I love just the creating a thing, wrapping it in a bubble and putting it out in the world. Full of mistakes. Everything I write is full of mistakes. Everything, because of the subject matter, gets outdated quickly, and I don't even worry about it. I've created it and I've released it and it's gone, and I can let it go and then move on to the next thing. And a lot of it is then driven just by, what do I feel like I have something to say about? And when I run out of things to say, I stop writing until something else bubbles up.
Where should people go on the web to follow you? What do you recommend?
I have it set up so the one-stop shop entry point is brandonrohrer.com. So that'll get you there.
Ahead of the game compared to all of us.
That's my one domain. Actually, I have two domains, but that's I'm making use of that side project. So, but yeah, please go there. It's just kind of like a little library, and hopefully it's not too overwhelming.